going to talk about all conversions, Google Ads versus conversions by itself. What is the difference between these two? That are different metrics that you can pull into as different columns in your Google Ads account under campaigns, under keywords, and so forth, and why it actually matters, which is the more important thing to figure out, which is sorely very little information on YouTube about how to actually make money from the certain things that Google does and has available to us advertisers. With that said, I'm going to tell you what the difference between these two are. That is all conversions versus conversions by itself, as per what Google is referring to when you see these column headers inside your ad account, because you can go ahead and edit and adjust your columns on your campaigns menu to see whatever information you want. You can pick all conversions and conversions. I'm telling you the difference between the two on this video, as well as how you can actually use it to make yourself more money from your advertising account, because that's what's important in this world as per what we're trying to do with our ad account at the end of the day. Anyway, so with all that said, getting into the content. So all conversions here, I'll start with that. This counts all conversions, even the ones that are marked secondary inside your Google Ads conversion menu. Because in the conversion goal menu in your ad account, where you set up different things that you want to track, phone calls, form fills, shopping cart purchases or checkouts, offline conversions, all this stuff, button clicks, you set up all your tracking there, and then what you can do is mark these particular conversion goals either primary or secondary. Secondary being, the main difference there is Google's not going to pay attention to those particular goals marked secondary, whereas Google is going to pay attention to the goals marked in primary to optimize your Google Ads. Okay? They naturally, if you're feeding in the right data, use your data to identify what users were pleased and helped by, so they can then in the future decide to have your ad show up more so for those people and less for the people that weren't so satisfied, because that helps them make more money. And, as a consequence, also helps you make more money, which is why you want to have the data, and as much of the data, as accurate as possible data, to be fed into your account in the first place. So, all conversions is meant to count primary plus secondary goals, whereas conversions itself is just the ones that you have marked primary. Which, by the way, if you're wondering why I even have goals that are marked secondary in your account, the answer to that is you actually want backups. I actually just went through the process of updating all of our company policies at our ad agency to set up a backup goal for every goal that we're tracking. If we're tracking form fills and phone calls, we're going to have a backup form goal set as secondary and a backup phone call goal set as secondary, so that if our primary form tracking goal or our primary phone call tracking goal break, we have a backup goal there, not only just that we can immediately switch to and mark primary, but that also has collected all the data and we didn't lose any data for the time that the primary goal that we were using before was broken. There is a way to be able to tell Google, hey, my conversion tracking has broke for the last 3 days, so ignore all the last 3 days conversion data, but it doesn't allow you to do things on a goal-by-goal level. So if you have one call goal that's broken and your form goal wasn't broken, you're actually forfeiting all the data from your form goal to get Google to ignore the phone goal that wasn't tracking properly for the last 3 days. So, and then similar to that, by the way, this is actually the reason why we switched up our policy at our company to start having backup goals. If you probably haven't experienced it yet, but you can have conversion goals that are just not, because it's easy to know when a goal is broken if it just says 0 phone calls for the last week, right? You know it's broken then at that point in time, or respectively for a month or whatever it is, depending on the amount of clicks that you're getting in your account at any given time, or what you know, like what's normal, what's not in terms of phone calls, or if you have calls coming in and it says 0, you know it's broken, right? You know to do something. But it's very common nowadays too as well. Tracking, first of all, by the way, breaks all the time, but it's very common that your goal will just be intermittent. It intermittently tracks what it's supposed to track and intermittently does not. So whereas it was tracking 100% of your goal, phone calls, let's say before, it can start tracking 70%, and you would not know it if you did not have a backup goal that also tracked phone calls to then have a basis of comparison. There's literally no basis of there's no way to know a goal's undercounting other than you set up a test call and then another test call, and even then you'd have to put through 10 test calls to notice it's undercounting, like, you know, it's not counting 3 out of 10 phone calls. A much more feasible way to know if your goals are tracking all the conversions, not just some of them, is to have a backup goal to where in normal times you know the ratio of phone call goals that you've had between one and the other. And then once a week come in and check and make sure that ratio is similar to what is normal in terms of the number of goals. Because, you know, if normally your backup goals tracks plus or minus 10% of the same goals as the primary goal, and then the primary goal breaks, now you know right away that it's not doing what it's supposed to do, because now it's 30% less than what it normally is, if you get my drift here. So you should always set up backup goals for every goal that you're tracking so that you know if the primary goal that you have is only intermediary tracking in an intermittent way, so that you can go ahead and get it fixed as soon as possible, because the longer a goal is broken, the more likely your ads are going to run completely off the rails, and the more likely it is, even when the goal is fixed, that you have an account that's never going to be the same again, or is going to have to go through a really long, let's say multi-month relearning or learning process all over again. So even when you exclude all that data using the process that I said Google also has. So you want to have backup goals and primary goals for the purposes of what I said, to keep an eye on just the health of your conversion tracking goals. You should do the backup goal, check the ratio of goals being triggered between the primary and secondary goal once a week is what I would recommend, and then once a month setting and sending through an actual test call or form fill or contact or shopping cart purchase, just to also have another way of testing your goals, because the lifeblood of your account is more than anything else predicated on the quality and the volume of data you have fed into your account. You can have a total shit account set up, but if you get the right tracking data in there and you get it in there long enough, your ads are going to work pretty well anyway. You always want to do the best you can with your ads and landing page fundamentals to get to you can make the most. But literally speaking, I see it all the time. Someone can have a poor account and they set up the tracking right, and they're still going to be profitable because the data will eventually weed out what doesn't need to be there, and Google giving so much benefit to the person who ultimately that where if we'll just say if they know how to run a certain ad, they know the 10% that really does well with this mediocre ad, because it knows the 10% who likes that ad, it ultimately does pretty well for them and their users as well as you as the advertiser, because it just knows how to filter out the stuff that doesn't work so well that it makes up for everything else. But anyway, I know I got a bit off track here, but so you have your backup goals. Secondary, if they're marked in secondary, Google will not use that in your bid optimization for your account, which you wouldn't, because it would double count goals then at that point in time. Even though you want to have a secondary ready to go at any point in time and use as a counterpoint of reference. Now, in terms of all conversions, this will typically convolute the true health of your advertising account that you have, because it obviously double counts conversions, and I already kind of been through this, but just know if you look at all conversions, it's not the real amount of conversions, assuming, or at least unless you don't have any secondary goals. Because then if you don't have any secondary goals, then all conversions would basically do the same thing as regular conversions would do. And then lastly, along with this, it's useful to check short-term ad performance using all conversions. Why is that? Because you can actually look at micro-conversion data to see if you're off. In terms of something's broken. The worst thing you can always, I see people do it all the time, where their sales are off for a couple days and then they say, oh, the ads must be broken. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. And then they make that change and then that sends their account into actual learning mode, which sends the results south even more. And then they panic even more. And then they make more changes, which just any change in Google Ads they hate. Their algorithm absolutely hates change, and the bigger the change, the more the results fluctuate short term. You can have a positive change, but just for the fact that it was a change, your results are going to go down before they're going to go up again. So they'll get into this death spiral essentially, because they make a change, it causes the results to go bad, so they think that change was bad even though it might have been good, which then they're going to make another change which compounds the whole thing, and it just builds on itself. This circling the toilet bowl, and they're doing it themselves. Whereas if they were to just start it out, trying to put frame of reference around it, not act so quickly, and more importantly, you have micro conversions where they're tracking not just purchases, but let's say the leads coming in, phone calls, form fills, or maybe going another step down, tracking people that have been on the site and has clicked on the FAQ page, or somebody who has, let's say, went partially through the sequence, that if you have a multi-step form, or somebody who has also, another good example would be that for a decent micro conversion would be somebody who's been on the site at least 5 minutes. You could set that up as a goal. But these micro conversions, which I primarily use micro conversions when we start up an account and a campaign for the first time, because we're going to get a certain minimum amount of data for the algorithm that runs the campaigns and the bid optimization to get off the ground more quickly than if we waited around for enough sales data to come in, because you need like at least 30 conversions to be able to actually do something with the refinement of your ads. Micro conversions come in handy as well, because if you don't have sales for 2 days, you could say, oh, is something broken? If you could see that normally, because there's, in terms of sales, things fluctuate. One thing that fluctuates sales that people don't want to believe or recognize, we'll say, is the weather. You would be shocked how much the weather affects sales. And even for an e-commerce company, when the weather changes, people's moods change, and then that affects whether or not people buy. And it'll be confusing to you, because people will be clicking through, they'll be spending your money, but they won't buy. But they aren't buying and pulling the trigger because the weather didn't affect their ability to want to look online, but it affected whether or not they were going to be able to part with their money physically. Another thing that greatly affects sales, that it's outside of your control and outside of your strategy you're using on your account, is political stuff, or current events, I should say. If there's a war just starting, that'll kill your sales for a week through no fault of your own or your account. So in these situations, knowing what I am mentioning to you here, why every change is going to send your account performance south, the bigger the change, the bigger the amount that it goes south before it goes back up, you want to make as few changes as possible to your account, because there's always going to be a negative / penalty to your account performance when you do that. So if you look at the micro conversions, and normally you get at least 20% of your people to start your quoting process from the amount of clicks you get on an ongoing basis, and for 2 days you didn't get any sales, and you're thinking something's broken, but you see people are starting that quoting process at the normal rate, you could just say to yourself, okay, well, they're actually starting the quotes. I know the traffic quality hasn't changed because they're at least starting the quotes, and anybody who is interested is at least going to start the quoting process. So I shouldn't panic. I should give it at least a couple more days to see if this is a short-term fluctuation consumer buying behavior, or just the bad luck or luck of the draw, because when you're talking about statistical odds, it's like a slot machine. You can win on the next pull, or you can win 5,000 pulls from now, because even though the odds are set by the machine, certain things happen in chunks, and sometimes they don't. So, but anyway, you use the microconversion data to give you some front-end leading data to let you know if something's truly broke, or is it a good idea to wait a few extra days, even though it's tempting to start making changes now, before you go ahead and make a change and make that drastic action for your account. So, and the algorithm, by the way, gets helped a lot by the microconversion data as well, because the algorithm also for the same reasons that I just said, when the sales aren't coming through, even though you have leads set up as your primary conversions, and you've set up maximize conversion bidding strategy, and then with a target cost per lead of, let's say, $35, you're shooting for that, but no leads are coming in, the algorithm will say, well, there's no leads coming in, but I shouldn't immediately start cutting down the budget on this campaign, because at least the microconversion data is coming in, which to the algorithm they're going to know that the leads will be coming through. It's just a matter of time, and to not alter the source of the traffic and the spend, because they know as long as those microconversions are coming through, the real conversions you want, that is the phone call, the form lead, or the sale, is going to come through eventually, and to not alter what they're doing on their end as well. So anyway, with that said, conversions by itself, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where, because a primary goal is used by Google for bidding optimization purposes, and decide when your ad should show up and when it shouldn't. When you bid on the keyword red shoes, it's not just showing up for red shoes. There's 5,000 different people searching for red shoes, male, female, old, young, from Texas, California, whatever. And the algorithm uses the primary conversion goals to identify what part of the people searching for red shoes on an ongoing basis should your ad should show up for, and which should not. And so with that, essentially the algorithm, you want to feed in quality data, and the goals that are marked primary, it's going to decide should it show up for somebody for that keyword, that search for that keyword, or should it not, based upon that primary goal data. And so basically just know that the primary goals, that's specifically what data it's using to refine your ads, and the secondary it's not. And if you're going to look at conversions by themselves, it'll automatically weed out all of the duplicate, backup, non-working goals that are marked secondary. Or in other words, another way to say this, if you see a goal that's not working in your conversion account, you can mark it secondary, and it'll, as a result of that, be not in your conversion data anymore, on your campaign menu, your keyword menu, so on and so forth. And then finally, as I mentioned already, this conversion goals, that is, i.e. goals that are marked primary, is what powers your smart bidding itself. So, but anyway, with that said, the all conversions column on Google Ads, that is what it does versus just the conversion column by itself, and why it matters to your business. And then, like I said, you're going to have some information on this video that's going to help you actually make more money from what you're doing. That is, if you're not tracking as much stuff as you can, you should be tracking it. That is, if you have sales that occur not for your website, you want to get those sales back into your account, because that's going to help you make more money. Or if you're tracking leads already, you should be scoring the leads and then sending the lead scores into your account to optimize your ads. Or if you're not tracking phone calls and form fills yet, and you're trying to generate leads, you should track those so you can steer your ads with that. If you're doing all that, you should set up some micro-conversion stuff that, if they do this, they're more likely to turn into a customer. That is, they started a quoting process, you set up a goal for that, or they've been to the site 5 minutes already, set up a goal for that, so that the algorithm has the most information to work with to guide your ads with. And dry spells where you're not getting any sales, at least knows that things are on the right track, and it shouldn't ultimately make a change for you, and that also you, the human optimizer of your ads, you have some other information to lean on when you have to decide if something's broken or not, and do you need to take action or not. The more data you get into your account that is relevant and useful, that is tracking things that correlate with people who buy in one way or another, or just literally buy, the better the results you're going to get. The more data that you're able to send, the better quality data that you're able to send, that is people that are actually doing the things that you want to track, the more your results you're basically going to get. It's really that simple. And more than half of the value of your advertising spend on an ongoing basis is just the data, because you can make no money today. You will generally make money when you've got enough data accumulated by your account. It's just a matter of how much data do you need before you can break even and start to get to profitability. You set up all your ads and landing pages and all that as best as you can, so you hit profitability as quickly as possible with as little data as possible. But the data alone, like I mentioned earlier, can get an average campaign and ad to work well if you run it long enough. If you run it for years and you have the data feeding it, it'll eventually find out some small part of what you're doing that's useful and then pound that. So there's so few people who focus on improving their ads by increasing the conversion tracking data of their account, whereas that's typically the place to start before you actually do anything else. Because like I said, you could do nothing else right, get the right tracking data, and probably start making a ton of money. Maybe not instantly, but when you've built up enough data, certainly so. Which, it's not a get-rich-quick